2020, and we're live. Our very first one in 2020. Oh my gosh, Lori Christie, Myers crew, friggin' low. Oh, how are you? 67 people. So good. Oh, so good to see you. So good to be back on solid ground, not on a boat, which I'm very thankful for, but holy shit, there were a lot of children. It was crazy. Nice to see you. Yes, I've missed you too. 2 weeks. How was Christmas? Did we talk after Christmas? I think we did. Never mind. How was New Year's? Oh my gosh. Okay, first things first. We just got back. If you found yourself here, hi. I'm Jody Carrington, Dr. Jody Carrington. I'm a psychologist, and I talk about reconnection and all things relationship and how we're going to change the world together. So if you're part of this community, I'm so glad you joined us. And if you are been here for a long time, oh my God, I'm so glad to see you back. So 2020, actually, what's really kind of exciting is Aaron and I just got back tonight. We were at Marty and Matt's. Marty's my ride or die, and we were just doing a little bit of dreaming for 2020. And I am so excited about all of the things we have coming up. Holy mama, it's going to be good. So you can't get somewhere where you don't know where you're going. So this whole idea of really setting out some intentions about, hi sis, some intentions about where you're going to be becomes so critically important. How you set out what you want for yourself is really important. And so Matt and Marty and I were, and Aaron, we're just sitting tonight talking a little bit about where we want to be. What is it going to look like when we sit in the same place in 2021? So it was fun, and oh my God, we want bigger, we want better, we want more messages. We really think that our mental health training for teams in education is about to change the face of education, but more importantly, what mental health looks like in the classroom, and what we do with kids who are struggling, and what we do when teachers feel like they don't know what the fuck to do with kids who are struggling. I got a plan. So we're finalizing some of those things today, and I'm so excited about that. So that's really cool. And then we just got off a Disney cruise, which was great. We've been planning that for probably about 15 months now. The kids had this big plan, Bella's talking yes too. A very big plan about a very big plan about we've been to Disneyland, but we talked one day that, when we did enough stuff, we would go on a Disney cruise. And so that's what we unpacked for Christmas, a bunch of clues for them, and they had to unpack a little puzzle. And so they came up with this idea that we're going to go on a Disney cruise. And I did a little post about it today because Disney is phenomenal. They get it right every time. But it was a lot. So what's really cool is that when you're really excited to go on a vacation, which I love, and I feel very blessed that we have that opportunity, but you are just as excited to come back. And I was. So I'm happy to be back. We've had a couple of down days on this weekend, which has been fantastic. The kids, it seems like everybody gets a little bit sick and organized. Anyway, so we're back in organization for stepping back into things. I don't feel like I'm at my best yet. I got a few things that I want to do this week. I'm not traveling. My Grand Prairie is my first stop with their school division next Monday. That's the first time I fly again. So I'm really, really excited about that. But tonight we're going to talk about depression, and for a number of reasons, primarily because I think that Bell Let's Talk Day is coming up on January 29th. I'm going to do some fun events with National Hope Talks around that, and because it is such a massive, massive part of my just my purpose and my passion around just what mental health is, what it does for people, how it can be completely and utterly fucking debilitating, and how I guess as a therapist, I just wish I could share sometimes about what I see, how much I see people struggle and how much they don't want to be in a place. And just like with a physical illness, I wish I could explain it to the same status. But the ability for people to love on individuals who have a physical diagnosis is still remains, and I don't think we'll see a difference in my lifetime as easy to discuss or to get connection around or empathy for, all those things. So I want to talk a little bit about depression tonight. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it means from my perspective, why now is the time that we need to talk about it, all those things. So we're going to just step right in tonight. I always have a hard time sort of answering questions as we go, but you just, I'll be watching here a little bit, the best that we can. So, okay. So January is a tough month. And primarily one of the reasons why I think Bell Let's Talk Day is in January is because actually there's a lot of data that talks about January being sort of one of the most depressive months in the calendar for a number of reasons. There's so many factors that come into this. The highest rate of suicide is actually not until March or April from a national perspective, primarily because typically in January people are really flat, and which is, I would much prefer, obviously, than the other side of things. But I want to tell you a little bit about why. I want to give you a bit of a definition around depression. People use the terms depression and anxiety a lot, like I'm anxious, I'm depressed, and which I think is common. I mean, when we feel sad, there is a normalcy to transition where you should feel disrupted, where you should feel like, once you get off of something like a holiday or a break, where transition is sometimes hard for people and they feel sad about things, grief, loss, all of those things, there's so much typical, you should be sad around some very specific times of your life. Do you like how I'm cleaning the camera there for you? I don't think it's working. Sorry. So what I really want to talk about a little bit around is this idea that, January 24th is identified, it's actually the third Monday in January, as the most depressing day on the calendar. Happens to be my twin's birthday. So we don't think it's very depressing here in this house because we got two babies here on the ground successfully. But the truth is, the depression, this idea of sort of sadness and disconnect after the holidays, after bills come in and you probably have ate more than you wanted to, you probably by the third week in January have already broken resolutions. You had this idea that you wanted to be on your game and you were going to eat healthy, drink less, exercise more, all these things, and already you're like, fuck, we're back on Toffee Faye. And so you're just like, gosh, am I ever going to have a place where I can be committed and stick to things? And there's a couple of issues for that. We often set our resolutions to be ridiculously high and unattainable anyway. But anyway, back to that. It's cold, it's dark. I don't know where you are tonight, but it is -4,000 right now. And it's only going to get, this week, there's no end in sight. And so it's all of those things that come together that really make this time of year a bit tricky. And what typically I think the data talks a little bit about is that it gets really sad at this time of year. And what people tend to lose the most of right now is hope. And I want to just talk a little bit about, if I'm ever going to diagnose depression, there's a number of criteria. There's a massive difference between feeling depressed, as we would use it in a colloquial term, to having a clinical depression. And when you have a clinical depression, it is debilitating. And so criteria are things like, depressed mood more often than not, feelings of hopelessness, really just this idea that like there is no end in sight, I can't see anything that I'm helpful for, a decrease in energy, inability to concentrate, sleep and appetite loss. You don't need any of these, you don't need all of these, but a vast majority of them. A loss of a loss of interest in previously pleasurable activities, right? So when you used to enjoy hockey or running or knitting, and you're like, fuck, I don't really care anymore. And of course, suicidal ideation, thoughts of death, all of those kind of things. And you don't want them, right? Like, so it feels scary, it feels hard, it feels bad, it feels like, you don't want them there. And sometimes when you experience those for more often than not, you can get into this place where, we would identify that as a clinical depression or a major depression. Often this time of year, you'll hear a lot about seasonal affective disorder, which is, or SAD, which people sort of feel like sometimes they meet criteria for this time of year because it's about, the data around this is really like, there's certain times of the year where these depressive symptoms seem to be a little bit more acute for many people, and so we don't call it. It's a specifier to clinical depression, and so what some people think is that it is like depression light, or that it's a lesser form of clinical depression. That's not true. As it is in the DSM, or our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, SAD is equally as concerning as major depression. What happens is it's a specifier for what clinical depression looks like. It's just that it goes into remission at certain times of the year, it seems. Your depressive symptoms lift basically on a sort of fluctuating basis that seems to have something to do with calendar, with the year, with the light, with the capacity to be outside and be more energetic and active. And but it's still depression, and it still is something that needs to be, addressed, right? Because here's the thing, right? Like, being in a place where you are losing interest in daily activities, feeling really disconnected from the people you love and where you want to be, and losing appetite or gaining weight or feeling helpless and hopeless, that's not where we want you to be. That's not okay. That's not what we're wired to do. And so I just thought it was really helpful this time of year to start to talk a little bit about, the blues. What does it look like? And so for me, it's always a continuum. It is always about, you're never sort of in it hugely. If I am, when I worked on a psychiatric inpatient unit for adults, we know that sometimes from a psychiatric perspective, there's certain psychological or psychiatric conditions that become absolutely debilitating where you cannot function in life. And so there's no question then about our capacity to diagnose. Sometimes it becomes so tricky that hallucinations or delusions happen. And so that happens at one end of the spectrum. And then there's much more of a gray area where it just feels like, my gosh, I have a lack of energy, or I'm not motivated, or I feel sad about things and I can't quite put my finger on it. That is such a massive continuum that is sometimes difficult for people to understand. And I think what becomes really critical is this idea of understanding and giving yourself a little bit of grace, that oftentimes we tend to panic a little bit about when we feel those things at various periods of our life. Like, I don't know if I have a direction. What is my why? Why am I here? Do I feel like, oh God, I'm having trouble focusing or concentrating, or, sleep is sort of kicking me in the ass a little bit. I think that there are periods of time that intensity and frequency will increase and decrease in your life. When you have major deadlines, when you've experienced a massive loss, or, there's a big transition in your life, all of those things will require or result in a response to your body going like, what the heck is going on? Okay. So I want to be very careful about how we sort of jump to this conclusion that, oh my gosh, it's depression. But of course, let me just clarify all of these things. If any of this is a concern for you, I mean, your local practitioners, mental health, there's a 1-800 number, the suicide response prevention number that we'll have available at the beginning of this post, when I post this at the end of today, is always super helpful to be able to connect to. But I think what so many people have described depression to me like is really, in fact, you know what I want you to do? One of the best descriptors that I have ever seen. And I wish I might see if I can tag it here, but I'm not really sure how to do that. So if not, I want you to look at the black dog. So if the World Health Organization put out this, like a YouTube video. It's, I think, like a 3-minute YouTube video that I often show when I'm talking about significant mental health concerns, called The Black Dog. And it describes depression like a black dog. And it is a heaviness that follows you. It shows up. You're not really sure when it's going to show up, but it shows up, and it starts to talk to you about things like, you're not good enough, and I don't know if I need you around, and it takes over your thoughts and feelings. And so you can sit in your chair and look out at your children or your job or your partner and just think like, I don't fucking care. Like, blah, this feels awful, right? And it is not a choice. There's neurochemicals responsible in this process that make it very difficult to choose joy, that make it very difficult. Okay, Angela Murphy, tell me more. I love it. So Mental Health Canada took that out of their training. I'd be interested to know why, because I think it's phenomenal. Because there's a lot of millions of people. This is the issue. Okay. Complaints about the black dog being black. Okay. So all right. So let me apologize for that, because I never even thought about it being like that. I think just in terms of it being a heavy weight to bear is what I loved from it. So, but again, I would watch it because I think it's one of the best descriptors that I've ever seen in this process. And it really just is a little bit about, sometimes it's really difficult to talk a little bit about, and there's many then specific kinds that I think come into place. Okay, so anyway, back to the black dog thing. So what becomes really interesting is that they described it as this thing that sort of popped up every once in a while. And then it became heavier and heavier, where sometimes it just sort of then made you feel like so physically heavy that you couldn't go out. So then you started to isolate. It became such an issue to be able to step in and have social communication, and the capacity, the only thing more exhausting than being depressed was pretending that you weren't, and putting on that face of like, no, I'm really good. I'm fine. But it was such a hard, heavy thing to do that it took all of your significant energy in the run of a day. And I think then what happens is then you're just done by the end of the day, right? And what we tend to do is then isolate. Yeah, thank you, Krista, for, I think somebody's just tagged it on Facebook, and we'll see if we can do that. At the end, what really happens, I think, so significantly is just this capacity then to train the dog. To understand that if that dog is a part of your family, it's a part of your story. It could be a blue dog or a purple dog. It doesn't need to be the black dog, but it can be like anyway, just go with me for a minute. It's just this capacity to know that, like, how do then I teach it to help me heal? And so much about this problem is really about not denying that you have that experience, being able to embrace it and let the feelings come. When I think about anxiety and depression, I always think about it as a continuum. They're equally as debilitating in terms of their diagnosis. So when they're at their height of clinical presentation, anxiety and depression are equally as debilitating, but I feel like they're a continuum for me. And so one time, one of my supervisors in Nova Scotia, I still remember him explaining it to me like this. If you think about it as a continuum, he held up his pencil and he said to me, anxiety is the very active part of this mental illness. And so it often leaves you jacked. You can't sleep, you can't concentrate, you can't focus, you're worried about everything. The panic sets in. Depression is when you just become so exhausted by that anxiety that all you want to do is sleep, all you want to do is withdraw, all you want to do is stay away. You start, you stop giving a shit. Okay. So it is really that continuum, but equally as debilitating. And often what I think is really critical is millions of people suffer with this every day, and it's really difficult to tell. And I think I think that becomes one of the most helpful things for me, is to understand it. And when you hear people talk about being depressed and being anxious is one thing. When you see the significant capacity of how debilitating it can be, it is why I will devote the majority of my life to speaking about mental illness and mental wellness, because the stigma is still so fantastic. It is still so fantastic. And I notice it in kids. I mean, I talked to our son about it this week. Our oldest speaks often about his worries, and lots of questions about, who's going to die, when's going to die, is this poison? What do I think about these things? And it just really brought it home for me today. He and I sat and had a big chat about, what happens in your brain neurologically when you get worried. And, it's often, if any of you have heard me speak before, I talk about emotional dysregulation like this. So when a kid flips their lid, so this is your brain, this is Dan Siegel stuff again, but when your kid flips their lid and loses their mind, they get back into the limbic system, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And it really is often where anxiety and depression live as well, because when your prefrontal cortex is on, you have all your strategies and your skills. But when you feel completely out of touch with sort of what you're supposed to do, and you're in fight, flight, or freeze, right? Depression is in that, often in that freeze capacity, that like, right? I'm just done of fighting, that I just get so exhausted that I can't even manage. And in that way, what happens is there's certain neurological conditions that happen into this process that we don't really want to say. Now, if you came to me and said, listen, my sugars are completely out of whack, I'm doing everything I can to manage it with my diet, I am trying very hard to get through my day, and I'm not going to take insulin because I don't want to take insulin, because I feel like I'd be weak if I couldn't handle my own body. Yes, anger even comes with depression, yeah. Irritability often, squirrel. But I think what happens a lot is that it is this idea that I am so overwhelmed and exhausted that I feel like I'm drowning. And somebody told me this, I didn't want to wake up because it was much better to be asleep. And so when I woke up, it was the nightmare. When I was asleep, that's where I got reprieve. And so in depression, that's what it feels like. If I can just sleep, then I don't have to deal with what reality is. And that's what busts my heart wide open, is when we think about people just sort of trying to manage that on a daily basis, and again, have a job and live with your babies, and sit up with things becomes such an issue. And so when I speak about medication, listen, medication, for me, from my perspective, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I don't prescribe medication. What happens significantly around medication is when I have too much serotonin in my brain, a neurotransmitter that makes it difficult for me to put together sort of what I know to be true and how I feel in my body, medication in isolation often isn't nearly as helpful. Data is so strong on this. Then when really I connect my brain in a neurological place, and then I start to talk about what I do when I feel sad. How do I start to identify when those things come? How do I know that when I start to withdraw? How do the people around me know when things happen that they need to be my eyes and ears? Because I start to lose judgment. I get irritable and angry, and I start to do and say things that I typically don't, or I start to sleep more, and I eat less, and I don't work out, and I do all those things. Who are eyes on that sort of assist in that process. So when it comes to a medical illness, a physical illness, for example, or back to our diabetes example, we would have very little tolerance for a loved one to be able to say, if you're in fight, flight, or freeze, can that turn into anger because you're just trying to get through it? Oh my God. Okay. So there's this question a little bit around depression, anger that comes with depression, irritability that comes with anxiety and depression. Listen, when you're jacked the whole time, when you are in a panic state, or you feel like you're completely letting everybody down, the anger in this process makes you, your lack of feeling like, you're feeling like a failure. the story in your head, depression often doesn't speak kindly to you. Often depression isn't in your corner going like, you got it. We're going to get through this. This, you know what? This is just a minor blip. Depression speaks to you like this. You're a fucking loser. Get out of bed. You're failing your children. You can't even get your ass up. What is wrong with you? You're mentally ill. You have a disorder. You're damaged. Why would anybody want to love you? You're not fit to be their mom. You're not fit to be their dad. And so when that story is in your head, just imagine, I mean, in the depiction in the Black Dog, video is really that is the voice in the head. That is what the Black Dog does. And so every time people feel that shame, people feel that sense of like, whatever. So when people say, hey, mom, can you get this for me? What do you want? It's that irritability and that anger that sort of comes from this internal process that you're just trying to stay above water, right? Now, think about this. When you feel competent and confident and you're sleeping, right? And inability, sleep disturbance really becomes difficult, right? And so you think about a 2-year-old who goes without sleep for a day. How do they show up in the world? Right? And we're the same way. When sleep starts to get into this place, it becomes really, really, and sleep is always my number one. Like that when I'm doing an assessment, I'm like, okay, where's the sleep at? Because as soon as our sleep gets fucked up, it becomes really, really difficult, right? So anyway, it's a cyclical process where we just beat ourselves up and beat ourselves up and beat ourselves up, okay? So what I want to talk a little bit about tonight before we end is really this idea of, so what the fuck do you do about it? Clearly, this is the answer. I mean, this is the question all the time. A couple of things that I think are so critically important. And what I want you to really, to think about this as a clinician, the only word that permeates any therapy that I do is hope. And because there's so many things that can be offshoots of this. I've seen many of you, sort of commenting here about postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression. I mean, following Asher, that's where I understood what it meant to truly have a panic attack. After, postpartum for me, anxiety was out of control. And it was bad after the twins, but Asher was worse. And I think that I knew this as a clinician, and it is the one thing that I try to end every session with, that I do when I talk about therapy, is this idea around hope. Because it actually, the intervention that you do specifically as a therapist is not nearly as predictive of success in therapy as your capacity to establish a relationship where you can instill some hope. So if I can leave somebody in my office saying, okay, here's what I hear you, this is what I hear you saying, and here's where we're at, here's what I think about this. There's a 2-step process involved in that. So if you're walking somebody home through this process, the number one thing that you'll always want to do is fix it. We always want to come up with strategies. How about you try this? How about you go for a run? How about you do, blah, 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 right? And just like anything, empathy is the thing that becomes really critical. So if you're trying to assist somebody else in that process, these 3 words, tell me more, what am I missing, what's the hardest part, can be really helpful in pulling space into that, because we often just want to make it better. I can tell you that even with my son, we're in the happiest place on earth, and he has 1,000 questions about, like, is the boat going to sink? Are we going to die? How long are you going to be back, mommy? What time is this happening? Where are we going? But I'm like, okay, you're fine. He's like, no, I actually think, like, he said to me at one point, is there a doctor on board? Because I feel like my breathing is off and I feel like I'm dying. Okay, listen, you're fine, is what and we try to sort of pull it out of them. And so obviously there's take charge moments. You can't sink into this all the time, but I really want you to think about all of that process about, holding space for that. If you are in this place of really feeling overwhelmed, hope, this is, I think, the quote that we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow, but Martin Luther King says this: hope is everything that is done in the world is done by hope. So I think that everything that is done well in this world is done by hope. And I also found, of course, like And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these are love. And when you get into a place where you really want to be in a place of support, is really like, okay, let me hear it. And here's, let's talk a little bit about where we go from here. And I think when we're in this place, when I get in the darkest times, when I start to think about like, oh my gosh, this is all overwhelming and all I really want to do is sleep, there's a few things that some of you will know when you are regulated about what you should be doing. And for me, there is a couple of things. I only focus on one thing at a time. One thing. What's the next best thing that I can do? What is the next best thing that I can do today? So for me, sometimes that is, instead of like getting overwhelmed in my day, I need to make a list. Here are the things that I can do. If I make the list, that's one thing on the list that I needed to do, right? Here it is. This is what I'm going to do today. Those are the two things that I'm going to do today. Putting that into perspective sometimes helps. The other thing that I think really, particularly in January, is pick one small space in your house, in your office, and organize it. Often gives you some significant capacity to feel like you got the world figured out and you can kick it in the ass a little bit more. It was funny, before we went on our holiday, I was supposed to be doing 1,000 things, and I decided it was the day that I was going to clean out my closets because I couldn't decipher how many socks I had left, because I had 187, one single pair, and it seemed every day that I had, this is going to be too much information, but like one pair of underwear, and I could not find it. And I would wear 3 shirts, and I had 187 of them. And so I just went through it and cleaned, and I cannot tell you how much better that feels. And of course, there's so many people way better at organizing than I am. Organizing, you can ask Marty this, or my husband, is not my forte. But how different I feel when my car is cleaned out. How different I feel when I know where I can find my pants or my socks. And so sometimes it's just that one little thing on your list that can kind of get it out there, and in a small space, right? One small space, that's it. So those things, I think. And again, guys, I mean, you're not going to be shocked by this, but this is my answer to everything is, when we get so egocentric, this is often what mental health does, or mental illness does to us, is it brings us inside. Or when you're spiraling, the dog is barking so loud, it becomes really, really interesting to be able to go like, what is my one act of kindness today? How can I bring joy to somebody else's life today? And I focus on one person to give it away to. That's what I do. Particularly on the hardest days, who am I going to give a compliment to? Who am I going to write a message to on Instagram? I got this beautiful message from Roman Laurie the other day, just saying I'm picking one person every day who is in my world that I want to give a message to, and you're it today. So it is really switching this capacity from internally focused to externally focused, even if it's for a second. Even if it's for one person. And if you then need to go back into this space of self-loathing and exhaustion and go back to bed, oh my love, here's the one thing that we need to know. The intensity and frequency is what I want to focus on. The intensity and frequency is what I want to focus on. And I promise you that it will not be there forever. I have never seen, not one time in my career, 20 years, I give myself a little more credit than I think I haven't counted lately. I've never seen anybody stay in a perpetual panic attack. You will come out of this. I've never seen anybody stay in a clinical state of depression forever. The intensity and frequency are all we focus on, right? And we often sort of get a little bit scared that we think, oh my God, this is going to last forever. And this is often how the cycle starts. Holy fuck, this is, it's never going to stop. This is not true. Shut up. Anxiety, shut up. Depression, that's what the dog does, is it barks so loudly that you start to believe that to be true, and it is not. And so it's not unlike the waves of grief. It's not unlike emotional dysregulation, your kids losing their friggin' minds. That doesn't last forever. It feels in the moment that it's absolutely, you're never going to get out of it. But it is in that capacity to remember that, to be able to sort of have somebody remind you of that. And when you can externally focus, if even for a second in a day, my only job today is to look outside of me. So another, of course, surprise, surprise, gratitude is the thing that makes you do it. And listen, I often talk about this. I say this to people who have lost their partners tragically or buried their children. How could you ever think to even say to somebody who has experienced such unthinkable tragedy, that they would have anything to be thankful for? But here's the thing. That is where the biggest gifts lie, right? Is when you can shift that capacity to turn away from that. And where is it? What is it? Who is it that today in this moment I have something to be thankful for? In this moment, this is what I'm thankful for here. Even though I've lost this, or I don't have a job, or I'm stage 4 or whatever, what is that sort of idea to seek and find. And listen, I will be the first to say, on many days, probably the days where you need it the most, it will be the hardest to do. That is often the first indicator that that's what needs to happen. So yeah. And here's the other thing too that is maybe easier, is music. And it is something that I did not use nearly enough for a very long time. But if I need, how do I not know this? Because my girls on Grey's Anatomy have been dancing it out all the way through med school. They know. They know. And if Meredith Grey knows, clearly it's correct. But it's just really that idea of like, okay, so what do I do in this moment to get me through? Where's your playlist? And if you need a playlist, I got mine you can borrow. So again, guys, I'm sorry for the sake of time. Holy shit, I already have you here for 36 minutes. Okay, wrapping it up. What I really want you to think about is of course a couple of things. If you haven't, the Black Dog was tagged here on our Facebook page, and just Google it up here, my friends. And if you want to take a look at that, the Dark Dog, we can call it whatever we want, but I just think it's beautifully done by the World Health Organization. And if you want to understand what it looks like to experience depression, if you have somebody who you're really frustrated with, who is struggling with mental health issues, it really helps. That really helps so many people who I've talked to before. And then what we're going to do about it in the next little bit is just the next best thing. You pick one thing. You choose one small part of your office, one small part of your bedroom or your kitchen to organize, and we do that every day. I want you to think a little bit about externally focusing, at least for 5 minutes in a day, 1 second in a moment, sort of buying somebody's coffee, giving somebody a compliment, just noticing what's happening, can sometimes shift that focus in a little bit. The gratitude stuff, music. And guys, the data is so strong on looking after your body. And I think we get really overwhelmed, particularly when in this hopeless state, like, oh my God, I should be back at the gym. Oh my God, I should be drinking more water. Oh my God, I shouldn't have toffee for breakfast. Toblerone actually was today. But I just want you to do a little thing. You don't have to run a half marathon tomorrow. All I want you to know, Alex Krev is leaving. Anyway, I don't want you to, that's where we fuck up all this resolution stuff, is we start to really go all or nothing. And all I want you to think, particularly if you're struggling really significantly in this January, is just the little things, right? Tomorrow, your only job, drink water. That's it. That's it. Your only job, you do not have to run on the treadmill for 20 minutes. You get on that treadmill for 10, good. Good. Next best thing, one sweet Jesus step at a time. All right. I'm going to post a little bit tomorrow about hope, because I think that is the thing that is the answer to most things. Peace, hope, and love. No, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of those, obviously, is you just give it away. Many times you cannot fix this. You can just be there and love the best that you can. Sometimes in this world of suicide and significant clinical depression, it's not enough. You can't love people through it. I mean, it's just like a physical illness, cancer. All we can do is use every skill that we know on the planet. This is how we fight cancer. This is how we fight stage 4 cancer, is we just look for every possible thing. And sometimes we don't get to the end of it the way that we want to do it. And that busts my fucking heart wide open. I just think there is so much more we could be doing in this world of mental health. And I think it starts with conversations like this. I think it starts with building communities of people who want to know better and be better, and just know that how we start this conversation is we show up and pay for somebody's coffee tomorrow. We show up and give the dad a compliment at the hockey rink. We, remind our partners what we love about them. That's it. That's the best we can do with what we got. We're just walking each other home, right, Ramdas? We are all just here walking each other home. So there you have it, my friends. Our first Sunday Live 2020. I hope you enjoyed it. This week I'm in the office all week. I cannot wait. Just hanging with my favorite crew, working a little bit on the Connections Network. So we're ready to launch that here right away. So stay tuned for that. And and then we'll be back next week. Sunday night, I think I'm here. So we'll announce some of our topics. We're going to do a little bit more about connection and things this week, but I'm excited to see what we're talking about next Sunday. So listen, you have a fantastic week. It's cold as ever loving. If you're in Alberta, oh my, just be very thankful for warm coats, I guess, is what we need to do. And love on each other, especially a lot during this next little month. And my God, you're powerful. Do not forget, all we need is you. You show up for those babies. You show up in that workplace tomorrow. You hug your partner a little bit extra tight today. And if you only knew what everybody's going through, man, if we only knew. All we need is each other. So have a fantastic week. I cannot wait to see you next week. And thanks for being here tonight, guys. It means the world to me. Okay, good night. My Facebook.